Okay, so we're going to do learn outcome 5 and 6 together, because 5 is only relatively small. 5, inside of there is data flow diagrams. This video will not cover data flow diagrams. It will, however, cover information sources and data types. So, sources. So, for instance, you get internal sources. So this is data that we can get from internal, within inside of the business. That's going to be stuff like internal financial reports, market analysis, all them kind of things. We can look at how we can source our own information from internally. Whereas external, it might be, for instance, supplier prices. So where we might want to buy from. Say if we were a restaurant, we might want to buy from a specific supplier. We will have we'll have to source their prices, so then we know how much a loaf of bread is, or how much a fish is, or how much a steak is, or whatever. The next part is primary and secondary data. So primary data is basically reports, is basically information that we have gathered ourselves. So for instance, stuff like reports direct from employees. So for instance, how much progress a certain scheme might be on, or whatever. That will be primary data, something that we have taken. Whereas secondary data could be information taken from somewhere else. So for instance, stuff like it says there, survey results received from market research, that might be done external to the company, but also done by an external firm as well. Interest rates charged on loans from a bank. So if you take a loan out from a bank, you will get charged X amount of interest by the bank, so they can earn their money. That information is secondary data, because that is from someone else, not from you. Okay. And then the qualitative and quantitative data. So qualitative data is basically words and letters evolving around a specific product. So the colour of products, names of employees, style of t-shirt, style of shorts, all them kind of things. Whereas quantitative is mainly numerical. So for instance, expiry date on medicine, and you can get loads on that. Okay, the number of staff working in an organisation, that is numerical, and then that quantitative data can be compared to other similar companies, and therefore then you can make decisions on how to increase the income of that specific company. Okay, so now we're going to move on to number 6, and number 6 is all about basically how can we protect our data, what are the risks involved around there, and then also how can we protect ourselves from potential risks. So the principles of information security, the first one says confidentiality. So making sure information can be accessed by individuals, groups, or processes authorized to do so. So in other words, our data is seen by only us and us only, and if it is seen by other people, then we've got a right to know about that. The integrity, making sure that the information is accurate, making sure that it's fit for purpose, making sure that it is relevant to what we want as well. Okay, so for instance, if we are I'm a teacher in a high school, and if I change my address, I have got to inform my high school as my employer that to make sure that that information is accurate and the integrity is intact. And the last one there says availability. So the information is always available to and usable by the individual, groups, or processes that need to use it. So in other words, if I need to use my bank details, I know that I can just log into my online banking using my own username and my own password. Next one, that is risks. So what are the risks attached onto this? Okay. So risks could be unauthorized or unintended access to data, such as espionage, poor information security policies. Okay, so for instance, us actually pretending to be someone else, and then trying to get in and to access that data. There was got accidental loss of data, so stuff like human error, equipment failure. These are potential risks that might happen. Intentional destruction of data, so stuff like computer viruses, targeted malicious attacks, which is malware, and people who might target specific things so people don't see that data. And then the last one there says intentional tampering. So intentional destruction is getting rid of it, whereas intentional tampering might be changing it, manipulating it fraudulently. Okay. 6.3 is impacts of a cyber attack. So for instance, you might have loss. So you might have financial loss, loss of data, loss of reputation. Now, if a business has lost data and it's splashed all over the news, that business is not going to look very good. There's been loads of cases about that. Prime example is British Airways. They recently lost loads of data, and then their reputation then has obviously took a big hit from that. And obviously then intellectual property, so we might lose our inventions, we might lose our niche, our unique selling points, all that kind of stuff. The second one there says disruption, so operational. If we have a cyber attack, that means we can't still operate, which then means we will then lose out on money, which will then means we might lose out on any commercial following or any sort of commercial events that we might have on. And then the last one there says safety. So for instance, the safety of individuals, the safety of the equipment, and the safety of finances as well. These could all impact. These are all impacts of potential cybersecurity incidents. So to go into a little bit more depth, financial loss by a company. So by losing customers, the company will lose out on sales, therefore reduce profits, and therefore then go into potential administration, or if not, folding. The next one on top of that's going to be data loss. So for instance, under the new GDPR regulations, this can result in fines of up to £17 million, or 4% of the company's turnover. So again, if you lose people's data as an organisation, you could potentially get fined under the new GDPR regulations, and I explained about GDPR in one of my earlier videos. Reputation loss. People might boycott the company. Examples might be, for instance, the Sun newspaper. The Sun newspaper in Liverpool is boycotted because of their reputation in Liverpool. Okay, other things in terms of data loss, in terms of people losing data, will then think, oh, hang on, I don't want to work with that company because they have just lost X amount of people's data, basically. And then there where it says loss of intellectual property. Losing customers' data to hackers can be costly and embarrassing, but losing intellectual property to cyber thieves could threaten a company's future. So by a company getting their ideas stolen, that way then the company could potentially lose out on what they were working on for maybe quite a lot of money. Okay. Whereas loss for individuals, so for instance financial loss, stolen bank cards. I have actually been hacked once myself, and I lost a lot. Well, I did lose a lot of money because I was insured. I got the money back, and that was through a cyber criminal who just hacked my bank. The next one is data loss. So we might lose our data, forged documents, pretend to be you. Will pretend to actually people might take out credit cards in your name, people might get sort of passports in your name, that kind of stuff. All these things might occur by you losing your data. And then disruption. So disruption is stuff like operational. Prime example for operational is the NHS a few years ago got a ransomware attack, which basically meant that the whole of the NHS got hacked by this program called WannaCry, which basically meant that patients Operations were cancelled, ambulances had to be diverted then to other hospitals. Some life-saving operations could not go ahead because of this malicious attack that happened on the NHS. There we've got financial disruption, so stuff like loss of revenue. If we are out of business for say a month because of a hack, we will lose out on that month's take as well. Okay, but then also you might then have to pay, certainly to reimburse the customers if they are at if they've lost out on anything, but then also the cost to actually get the problems fixed as well. And the last one, like I said, safety. So individuals, so the safety of individuals by after a cyber attack could be threatened. Personal data could be threatened. The safety of maybe someone's home situation could be at risk, all them kind of things. Second one down says equipment. So obviously the equipment post cyber attack might need to be updated, upgraded. A load of stuff might need to be taken off, and therefore then you might have to then get rid of certain pieces of hardware. And the last one there says finances. So $400 billion is estimated the annual cost of cyber attacks to businesses. That is a hell of a lot of money. That's where their bank details are stolen. Organisations have got to then fix their systems to make sure it is bulletproof, so nobody can hack them in the future. Moving on. Physical protection. So how can we physically protect our data? So biometrics, stuff like fingerprint access, facial recognition, iris scanners, voice recognition, and this is to verify someone's identity. Quite simply, locks on doors, making sure that the doors are locked to them computers, making sure making sure that there is actually lock so people physically can't get in to misuse the computers. Okay, device locks. So this is where we might lock our device, so stuff like passwords on our phones, passwords on our computers, anything like that where we can put a password on that only people know. Now, iPhones recently, on all the latest iPhones, don't have a fingerprint scanner anymore. They don't really have device locks, they have Face ID. So that way then people don't see you actually typing in your code, it just needs to use your face and your face only. Which therefore means that people, if they haven't got the same face as you, which is highly unlikely, they are not going to be able to get into your phone. RFID badges. So if you worked in a building that you needed to gain access to, you would just get given a badge, and you could swipe the badge on a lock, and that then would unlock the door. So I'll put an example there of in a school. Schools, basically the staff have badges, and they are able to access the school, access buildings, access doors using these little RFID chips inside of their staff badges. Disabling USB ports. So for instance, nowadays people in big businesses will actually block USB pen drives because people could potentially put viruses on them, and as soon as they get plugged into a computer, it could then spread like wildfire in and around the computer network that is being attached into. Okay, so logical protection. Antivirus or anti-malware. This is there to protect your computer, to make sure that it looks at, it scans your computer, and it will destroy anything that is negative on that computer. Authentication. So for instance, people being able to log in using maybe a username and a password, for instance. Again, all this authentication might have a security password on, might have a PIN code, might have loads of different things on there. Firewalls. Firewalls are systems that are designed there to sit in between you and the internet, and all it'll do is it will check any outgoings and any incomings. If the incomings aren't useful or are going to be harmful for the local area network, it will just get blocked out. secure backups of data. So for instance, making sure that our data is backed up using maybe cloud storage, maybe on OneDrive, Google Drives, iCloud, Dropbox, all these kind of things. This is make sure that if we get any disaster, then we can obviously re-access that data from somewhere else. Okay, access rights to files. What it might be is in a school. So certainly in our school where I work, we have got a staff shared drive and we've got a student shared drive. Staff shared drive is only where staff can see, whereas the students can't see that data inside of that drive. Whereas we've also got a curriculum shared drive. That means both staff and students can see the data in there. But it comes down to read and write and read only. So the students will only have read only access to the curriculum shared drive. When they open up data out of there, they will have to save it then into their own area to then edit that way. And that's it. Thank you very much.